Sister reappeared after eloping and years of silence. I called her a stranger, family bonds questioned as guilt lingers. 9 years ago, when I was just 18, my entire world shifted because of something my older sister did. In my immigrant family, tradition and parental approval carried immense weight, and when my sister chose to elope with her boyfriend against our parents' vehement wishes, she shattered that world. At the time, I remember not having a strong opinion. It wasn't my place to interfere with her choices. But the fallout was immediate and harsh. She not only left without warning but also cut off all contact with every single one of us. My parents were devastated, nearly inconsolable. I remember how desperate and powerless I felt as I tried to reach out to her through every platform I could think of, only to be met with silence or, worse yet, discover I'd been blocked completely. In a final act of hope, I contacted her closest friends, begging them to help me connect with her. They said they didn't know where she lived but assured me she was happy, and I had to settle for that. She even left her workplace, disappearing entirely from our family's radar. Time moved on, and a sort of unspoken agreement formed between me and my parents. We just pretended she had never existed. Eventually, I blocked her out of my life, too. I found myself calling home from college more than ever, just to make sure my parents were coping and to fill whatever void my sister's absence had left. She became someone I never talked about, never thought about, someone erased from the daily narrative of our family. Looking back, I can't even remember the last time my mind wandered to her. And then, out of nowhere, yesterday she knocked on my apartment door. Seeing her standing there, looking like a memory brought to life, I reacted on instinct. She cried and hugged me tight. I hugged her back simply because it felt familiar, but as the shock faded, reality came crashing in. She was marveling at how much I'd changed, saying she'd missed me so much all these years apart. It dawned on me that I hadn't missed her, I'd mourned her. So I pulled away and asked her how she'd even found me, who gave her my address. She was evasive, insisting she'd promised someone not to reveal their identity. I pressed further, why didn't she call first if she'd gotten my number, too? She admitted she just wanted to see me in person. I told her bluntly that we'd moved on, that none of us needed her to be here now. She insisted her issue had only ever been with our parents, not with me. I reminded her that she'd blocked me, too, when she vanished. She apologized, saying she'd only wanted a fresh start, and then told me, almost matter-of-factly, that I was now an uncle. She had a son and a daughter. They weren't there because they were with their father, apparently, since she'd just gone through a divorce. That stung in a strange way. It was like, after all the pain, all the upheaval, her fresh start hadn't even given her the lasting happiness we all had hoped she'd found. She seemed shocked that I didn't already know about her kids, claiming she'd asked someone to tell our parents. That didn't matter anymore, it was too late. I told her as much. I told her we were strangers now. She asked about having lunch, catching up, but I told her it was best if we kept going our separate ways. She hadn't been there for me when I needed an older sister, and now we were no longer family in any real sense. We'd already mourned her and moved forward. Tearful, she scribbled down her address and phone number, handed them to me, and then left. That night, I talked to my girlfriend about the whole encounter. She listened and told me that family was forever, that my sister was still my sister and I shouldn't have just turned her away. I tried to explain that she couldn't truly understand what it had been like for us, the pain and confusion we endured after my sister's disappearance. And now, in the aftermath, I can't help but wonder, was it wrong of me to turn her away? Did I make the right call? Update 1. When my sister reached out to me after so many years, I was emotionally drained almost from the start. The meeting weighed on me in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. For years, after so much pain and wasted hope, I had made my peace with the idea that I would never see her again. She had my number, and although I considered blocking her new number more than once, and was advised to do so, I never actually got around to it. Maybe a part of me wasn't fully ready to sever that last thread, or maybe it just slipped my mind. On Tuesday, she messaged, asking how I was and if we could meet the next day. She said she really wanted me to meet her kids. I was conflicted. The idea of obliging her sat uncomfortably with me after all these years. Still, I decided to say yes, at least for the sake of meeting the kids. Yesterday, I found myself at her apartment, standing in front of my niece and nephew for the first time. My niece is 9 now, recently had her birthday, and my nephew is 6. They're sweet kids and, to my own surprise, I genuinely enjoyed being around them. But the introduction was strange. My sister explained to her son that, just as he is his sister's younger brother, I am hers. I didn't say so, but that stung, a subtle reminder of the years lost and relationships suspended in time. We all started talking, sharing stories from our childhood, retelling half-forgotten family legends. The conversation flowed more easily than I expected. I hadn't, and still haven't, told her everything is fine between us, but in that moment, we just talked like we used to. She told me that after she eloped and got married, she and her husband moved into his place, a few hours away, from where we'd all grown up. Then, around 2019, they moved to this city, the same city where I now live, although she claims she didn't know I was here until recently. I told her what I'd been up to, college, work, my girlfriend. It felt surreal summarizing years of my life to someone who should have been part of them. After a while, the kids went to their room and my sister suggested we do something together over the weekend. Suddenly, I couldn't pretend anymore. I told her we weren't okay. She couldn't expect me to forget everything. She apologized and tried to explain that her leaving had nothing to do with me and that she missed me. But an anger I didn't know I'd been carrying spilled over. I told her I didn't believe her, that if she hadn't gotten divorced, she probably would have forgotten I existed, that I could have been dead and it wouldn't have mattered to her, so happy and absorbed was she in her domestic life. It was ugly. I've never said anything like that before, but at that moment I wanted her to feel even a fraction of the pain she'd left me with. She broke down, sobbing, and told me that I could hate her if I wanted, but I shouldn't hate her forever. There needed to be a limit. Seeing her cry, the anger drained away and all that was left was regret. I sat next to her and asked about the divorce. She told me that for the first few years, life with her husband had been okay. She even said she'd sent word through a mutual friend when her kids were born, but either the message never reached us or my sister never actually sent it. We never heard a thing. Then COVID hit, and everything changed. Her husband became abusive, showed open disdain for their son, and revealed he'd been secretly recording their conversations. He gaslighted her, convinced her she was crazy, and told her she was a terrible wife and mother. She stayed for the kids' sake until she couldn't anymore. It was only with the help of a kind neighbor, who became a friend and helped her find a job, that she found the strength to leave. She even blamed our parents for staying in the marriage so long and for not reaching out to her. I told her I was there. I remembered. Our parents had pleaded with her not to go. I was 18, not a child. She said they'd told her she'd be dead to them if she ran off, so she blamed them for making her feel she couldn't leave her husband. I told her that made no sense, but she didn't want to talk about our parents anymore. She asked me not to say anything to them about where she was. I told her her relationship with them was her own business, not mine. Curious, I asked how she'd gotten my address. She begged me to drop it, saying it had taken a lot to get that information, secrecy, tears, convincing someone that I'd want to see my older sister. So I let it go. We sat and had tea and snacks, and she asked if I'd want to do something with her and the kids this weekend, or maybe just the two of us another time. I told her I wasn't sure. She accepted that answer without complaint. When I left, tears were streaming down her face again. We hugged, and I said goodbye to the kids. Since then my mind has been chaos. I lashed out at her, and now I regret it, but then I remember the pain I felt all those years and the anger rises again. It feels unreal knowing that now she's only 20 minutes away, and we could see each other anytime. I talked to my girlfriend about all this. She told me she supports me, whatever I decide, but that maybe I should think about the weekend plans with a clear mind. I honestly have no idea what I'll do next. Update 2. It was a bit surreal, carrying this secret with me while spending the weekend with my parents, pretending to be a complete family. All the while, my sister was away at her apartment, and knowing what I knew made the whole experience feel strange. When I got back home, she reached out and asked if I wanted to hang out the next weekend, the one that just passed. Her kids would be with their dad, so it would just be the two of us. I know what a lot of people might have said about that. I genuinely appreciate the advice and perspectives. Trust me, I considered all of it. My girlfriend had encouraged me to do whatever would make me happy. I spent some time reflecting, and the truth is, I realized that spending time with my sister would make me happier than avoiding her. This wasn't about her, not entirely. I needed to do something for myself. So, on Saturday, I went to her apartment. She asked about our parents, wondering how they were doing. I told her they were doing well now. Since she brought them up, I asked if she wanted to reconnect with them. I thought it might help both her and maybe even our parents. But she said no, repeating the same thing she's always said, that our parents said she was dead to them. I know it was something said in the heat of the moment, but I didn't press her again. We ended up heading to the mall together, bought a few clothes, then had dinner back at her place and watched a movie. It was a light hangout overall, easy conversation. But it wasn't like things used to be. Partly, it's because I can't totally ignore what I felt when she left us, how I had to be there for our parents, to try and hold them together. And she's changed, too. She's much more anxious and nervous than I remember. But, in general, the hangout was relaxed. At one point, I did bring up the question that's been bugging me. I wanted to know who gave her my address. I told her that, at this stage, I didn't regret seeing her, but they still shouldn't have given out that information. She immediately got defensive and almost pleaded with me not to ask, insisting it wasn't something given easily. She told me she had to plead, cry, and promise that she would accept rejection if I asked for it, and someone had to swear to keep it secret. So I let it go, whatever, I guess. Before I left, we agreed to meet up again soon. I know there are people out there who think I'm being stupid, who say I have no self-esteem, that I'm being used. But this isn't some abstract situation to me. This is my sister. The same sister who grew up with me, who helped me with school projects, who was always around to help out when I was younger. Yes, the same sister who ghosted us for 9 years. I'm still angry about it. But right now, I'm choosing to do what I want, not because I feel guilty or obligated. So far, all it's cost me is a subway fare and a few hours at the mall. I can live with that. If she decides to disappear from my life again, for whatever reason, I'm at peace with it. May we all get what we deserve if that's how it turns out. Update 3. On Thursday I stopped by my sister's place after work with a couple of books I'd picked up for the kids. It was one of those evenings where the air felt heavy before a storm. The kids were excited, bouncing through sentences so fast they tripped on their words. At some point my niece asked, offhandedly, if Nani was coming later with the spicy yellow pickles. My sister stiffened so hard I felt it from across the room. I didn't say anything in front of the kids. We played a round of Uno, I lost embarrassingly, and then the kids disappeared to their room to argue about whose turn it was to feed a virtual fish. I asked her quietly if our mother had been here. She stared at the cup in her hands like it could produce a script and then nodded. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Is that how you got my address?" Her eyes filled in an instant. She said she'd promised not to say and then broke the promise anyway. Our mother found her months ago. They've met a few times, just quick visits. Our mother gave her my address and made her swear not to tell me, not to tell our father, not to tell anyone. She begged me not to be angry with her and told me it had taken our mother an entire day of traveling and 3 long breaths at my sister's door before she finally knocked. I left with that inside me and sat in my car for a long time watching the empty space on the dashboard where a check engine light used to be. Then I called my mother. She answered like she always does, by saying my name twice. When I asked her if she knew, there was a silence long enough for me to picture her moving rooms to find one with a door. She said no, at first. I told her what my niece had said. I heard the smallest sound and then she said, very quietly, that she was wrong to lie to me. A woman from our old neighborhood had run into my sister at the pharmacy near the train station in the winter and called my mother from the corner aisle, whispering. My mother said she went alone the next week, took a bag with a sweater she knitted years ago and never gifted, stood across the street for 20 minutes and couldn't bring herself to cross. The second time she did. She told me she'd held her daughter's face and that she didn't even know what to call her. She said the kids were shy and polite and that my niece has my sister's exact way of tugging on a sleeve when she wants a question answered. She said that she had wanted to tell me but she was afraid that if our father found out from me, something in him would snap clean in two. She didn't want to risk that, not after everything. I asked her to meet us. Not later. Not next month. Sunday, in a park near my place. She said she shouldn't. She said your father shares my location and I told her to turn it off for a day, to put the phone in a drawer if she had to. She agreed and then apologized again, and then apologized for apologizing. I don't know how long we stayed on the phone after there was nothing left to say. Sunday morning I was early and still walked slow. My sister was already there with the kids feeding pieces of croissant to pigeons that didn't deserve the upgrade. She kept brushing imaginary crumbs off the bench and telling her son to hold the paper bag properly, like he was going to drop it and ruin something big. Our mother came 10 minutes later, with a white scarf I know she only wears when she's nervous. She looked smaller. She also looked exactly the same. When she saw my sister, she stopped a few feet away like there was an invisible line she needed permission to cross. My sister said, "Ma," like she hadn't used the word in years and had been practicing alone in her apartment. That was all it took. I stepped back. I won't pretend it was poetic. It was ugly crying in public, people walking their dogs pretending not to notice. My mother put her hands in my sister's hair and said her childhood nickname, the one that used to get shouted from the window at dinner. My niece held onto my mother's scarf like she was anchoring a boat. My nephew asked if she was really their Nani and my mother said she would be whatever they wanted her to be and if that was Nani, she would make the best semolina halwa in the world to earn it. They sat and talked. It came out in uneven pieces. My mother said our father had changed in some ways and in some ways stayed absolutely himself. The night my sister left, he'd said the sentence we all have been orbiting, dead to us, and then had run every red light in memory to the temple to pray for her safety. He had told my mother 3 weeks later that he didn't mean it and then refused to say anything else about it for years. When my mother first started seeing my sister again, she didn't tell him because she wanted to be sure my sister wouldn't disappear twice. She thought she was protecting all of us by holding it close. I don't know what I had expected to feel, but what I actually felt was tired, like I'd been holding a bag with both hands for too long and finally set it down. We were halfway through negotiating on names, what the kids should call my mother, what my sister was comfortable with, when my mother's phone vibrated in her purse. She fished it out for a second because old habits don't break, and I saw my father's name on the screen. She silenced it. He called again. She sent a message saying she was at the temple with a friend. He wrote back, "Which temple?" She didn't answer. 2 minutes later he called again and this time she answered, maybe just to stop the noise. He said he couldn't find her at the temple. Then he said, "Why is your location off?" She had forgotten. She had turned it off earlier that morning and then turned it back on to check a bus and never turned it off again. I could hear the way he said her name. That voice he uses when he already knows and wants you to say it anyway. She ended the call. We sat still in that strange way people do when sitting still changes nothing. He was there in 23 minutes. I know because my sister's building is 20 minutes away and my father is always 3 minutes late, even when he's early. He walked into the park like he had rehearsed the walk in his head. He saw us and stopped far enough that we still had to choose whether to go to him. My sister didn't move. He took off his glasses and wiped them even though there was nothing on them. He looked older than last time I saw him last weekend. That sounds impossible and it was. He didn't shout. He didn't say her name the way my mother did. He asked a question I didn't expect. Are those mine? And the kids, like they could sense something in the way adults were speaking, went very quiet. My sister stood up, nodded, and said the kids' names. For a second nobody breathed. Then he sat down on the bench across from us. I could hear the soft thud of a basketball from the courts nearby like it didn't belong to our morning at all. He asked my sister if she had eaten. When she said yes, he asked again, slower. He asked my niece if she liked school. He asked my nephew how old he was, and my nephew held up 5 fingers and then remembered he was 6 and corrected himself with a look that would have made my younger self laugh any other day. My father put his glasses back on and kept looking at their faces like he was trying to read something written there. He didn't look at my mother. Eventually he said, so quietly I almost didn't catch it, that he didn't know how to do any of this and that he wasn't going to stand in the way if we wanted to try. He said he would not apologize in a park. He also said he had never buried his daughter in his heart even if his mouth said it, and that he was tired of keeping a room in his house full of things he pretended not to see. Then he stood up and said he needed to take a walk. He didn't make it 2 steps before my sister said Baba, and then he stopped like the word had wait. He didn't turn around. He said he would call tonight. He left. After he was gone my mother cried the way you cry when something you wanted finally happens and it still hurts. My sister looked pale and steady at the same time. The kids were suddenly starving. We bought them ice cream at 10 in the morning. When I got home, my phone had a voicemail from my father from a number he never uses. He said he was sorry for being late to something he should have been early for. He asked me to send him a picture when I had one I thought he could handle. He told me not to tell my mother he cried, then cleared his throat like he could erase the evidence. Update 4. I sent my father a photo that night. My mother had taken it, a slightly crooked shot of my sister on the bench with both kids leaning into her, all elbows and knees and pigeon crumbs. He didn't reply right away. An hour later he sent me a picture of a cutting board covered in peeled mango skins like a bright mess and wrote, okay. Then he called from the same strange number and asked what bus my sister's building was near. He didn't want to go to her apartment. He asked to meet her at my place first, so you were there, and I didn't argue. He came early carrying a paper bag that clinked like it had jars and set it on my table and pretended to read the bus schedule on the back of his hand like it was useful. When my sister knocked, he kept his eyes on the sugar jar like he had to count the grains. She said Baba again, exactly the same way as in the park, and he did the smallest thing. He reached for the bag and pushed it toward her with one finger. Ashar, he said. Your mother made. Not yellow enough but she thinks it is. Then, after almost a full minute, you will take. He drank his tea in 3 gulps, the way he always does when he is trying to leave before he starts staying. He told my sister the kids would come a different day. He said the house would be loud. He said there would be food and that if she didn't eat he would ask twice. He said he would not apologize in a stranger's apartment, and my sister said, this is my brother's apartment, and my father looked at me like he wanted me to take sides in a fight nobody was having. He told us to come on Wednesday. Before it gets dark, he said, even though it's July and it takes its time. On Wednesday my mother cleaned like a landlord was visiting. She had the pressure cooker on the back burner so it could sigh to itself. She wore the white scarf and then took it off, folded and refolded it, put it away, took it out again. My father had opened the room. He hadn't gone inside. He had just dented the dust with his knuckles and come back out to sit at the table pretending the news on TV was interesting. When we got there, he stood up and moved the stool 2 inches as if furniture placement had suddenly become important for the success of the evening. I walked my sister down the hallway to that door. It was heavier than I remembered. Nothing was dramatic inside. There was no shrine, just a quiet hoard. Books with her name in the cover in her handwriting, the old hair straightener with the cord looped around it, a cardboard box with bangles that had made so much noise in our old bathroom it used to drive me crazy. On the top shelf, the sweater our mother had knit and never given, folded so perfectly it looked ironed, a dried up bottle of nail polish in a color that could only be called Brave. A poster from a band she had loved and our father had claimed not to hate. The curtains had been washed, I could tell because they smelled like the sun on wet cotton. My sister stood inside the doorway and put her hand on the side of the dresser like she needed to confirm it was solid. Her eyes did a quick inventory like she was checking on old friends. Then she picked up the sweater and pressed her face into it. She didn't cry then. That happened later at the sink when the tap was running and my mother pretended it was onions. For 20 minutes my father treated the evening like garden maintenance. He showed my niece, when they came after school on Friday, the money plant he has been trying to coax along the window with a bent fork as a stake. He complained that the birds were tearing up his chili seedlings and that he was putting out fake snakes, and my nephew told him very seriously that snakes don't live in plants and my father said, this one does. He asked my niece her teacher's name and then asked again slower. He took off his glasses, put them down, and then asked everyone where his glasses were as if this was a new ritual we all had to learn. Neighbors pretended to accidentally forget things on our doorstep. Around 6, the auntie from across the hall rang our bell like she always rings it, 2 fast, 1 slow, and walked in with a steel tiffin and the confidence of someone who has been walking into our kitchen since before I had memories. She saw my sister and her mouth did a small startled oh like a cartoon and she put the tiffin down too hard so the lid jumped. My father got to her before she could retreat. He put his hand on the counter and said, clearly, the sentence he had refused to say out loud to anyone for 9 years, this is my daughter. Auntie nodded like she had always known this was how it would go. She said my sister's name and then said, "You got thin," because she is incapable of saying anything else when confronted with emotion. She went home and came back with sweets we didn't need and tears that she tried to frame as allergies. The apology came in installments disguised as errands. My father asked my sister what was wrong with her door and then showed up the next morning with a new latch and a drill he bought because borrowing the neighbors would mean explaining. He took a measuring tape to the kids' bedroom and 2 days later a delivery man staggered up 4 flights of stairs with a bunk bed my father had insisted was on sale but came with a receipt that said otherwise. He sat on the bottom bunk and patted the mattress like he was testing it for storms. He asked my nephew to show him his spelling words and then pretended not to know the meaning so my nephew could teach him. He put an envelope of cash in the freezer, behind the peas, where he hides anything he considers important, and when my sister found it, he said it was for ice cream because summer is expensive. I expected my mother to be the one to say it first, but it was my father. Not the word sorry, not exactly. He finally did what he said he wouldn't and apologized in our living room. He did it sideways. He was standing at the sink with his sleeves rolled up, washing a pot like it had offended him, and said into the steam, to the pot, to the tile, I should have kept my mouth shut that night. He didn't look at my sister. He didn't say her name. He said, "A father's mouth is quicker than his head." He said, "I thought I was pushing you back into the house. I did not know I was closing a door." He kept his hands in soapy water like they were cold. My sister was sitting on the floor sorting Lego by color because the kids have introduced a new dictatorship into her life. She said, without getting up, "It hurt," and he nodded like she had given him a number he could finally write down. My mother placed a towel next to the sink as if that could clean anything. We took the kids to the sweet shop in our old neighborhood on Sunday. My father insisted on driving even though his parallel parking is a family joke. He had a lot of dignity in a very small parking space and somehow made it work on the 4th try while my niece gave a running commentary from the backseat. That would have crushed a lesser man. The owner froze for a second when he saw my sister and then did that loud, performative welcome he does for men he needs to like him. My father didn't give him room to make it weird. He said, like he was buying bread, my daughter and her children, and ordered too much. He made the kids taste every milk sweet they pointed at and told the owner their names so many times it became a litany. When we left, he held the door for my sister and asked if the jalebi was too sweet and then asked again slower. The kid's father texted while we were there. Just I'm downstairs because he always is on time down to the minute for pickup. My sister's face did something I had seen before and hated, shrinking, bracing. We walked back to their building as a unit that probably looked like a parade of people who had all just discovered how to share sidewalks. He was leaning against his car, sucking at his teeth the way he does when he wants to look unbothered. He saw my father and rearranged his face. My father didn't posture. He just gave him the same polite nod he gives the mailman and said, "They will be down at 5. There is time." The man said he had plans, and my father said, "So do they," like that was a new law. Nobody raised a voice. It didn't need it. When my sister and the kids went upstairs to pack, my father stood on the curb next to me, took out his keys, put them in his pocket, took them out again, put them back, like he needed to do something with his hands. He said, almost to himself, he will not talk to her like she is small, and I didn't answer because I agreed and also because I didn't want to spook the moment by naming it. Late that night my father sent me another message from the same odd number with a picture of the room. He had taken the band poster down and replaced it with a piece of paper with a shaky list in his writing. It said, fan, dust, curtain, shorten, bulb, yellow, toy shelf, sweets, no. Underlined twice, door, oil. He had drawn a box next to each item like he was giving himself homework. He wrote, tomorrow, and then, what is ice cream flavor for the small one? Update 5. On Tuesday night my sister sent a photo that made my stomach feel like it was balancing on a fence. A thick white envelope on her doormat with our surname in a government font that didn't know how to pronounce it. Inside, a motion to modify, words about instability, and interference from maternal family, the kind of sentences that sound like they were written to impress a wall. She brought the papers to my place and sat on my carpet because the couch felt too high for what the moment was. She kept flipping the pages like it would change the order they were in. When my father came, he didn't take his shoes off right away, which told me exactly how serious he thought it was. He read each page with his glasses on the very edge of his nose like the words were a wire he was checking for current. He did not swear, not even in the tiny way he does in his language when soccer goes wrong. He said, calmly, we will answer. My mother made tea so strong the spoon stood on its own for a second because that is how she responds to paperwork. The next morning we went looking for a lawyer. It felt like shopping for something you never want to own. A cousin's neighbor's son turned into a receptionist with a counterfeit plant and a window unit that rattled like it was keeping a secret. The lawyer we ended up with wore shirts that had survived other people's summers and spoke softly, which made me trust him. He didn't blink at the 9-year hole he cared about right now. He told my sister the court cared about the kid's routine, not about anyone's dignity. He asked for letters, so we went home with homework. My father wrote his in pencil first, on a pad meant for grocery lists. He kept starting over until the eraser made a bald patch on the page. He wrote her name, then our names, then the kids' names, like he was laying down stepping stones across a stream. He finally used a pen and, when he messed up an R, he put a dot next to it like he could apologize to the letter. He did not mention temples. He wrote that he had built a bunk bed and that it had 2 rails so nobody would fall. He wrote that we were loud at dinner and that there would be vegetables and that nobody would be small in our house. He put the letter in an envelope and then put that envelope in another envelope and then handed it to me like it might catch a cold if not handled properly. The first exchange after the motion was at the police precinct, because that's what the paper told us to do until the judge could look at it. The building smelled like coffee that had given up. A cop with a bored face and kind eyes told 2 different families where to stand and made everyone feel like a line could solve a life. My father wore a collar, the one that lives in the back of his closet and smells faintly like weddings and mothballs. He brought a small tiffin because he refuses to let a child cross a threshold with less food than necessary. My sister's ex came in with the tight jaw he saves for performance. He saw my father and did that thing with his mouth where you can watch him decide not to smile. He didn't look at me or my mother or anyone not wearing a badge. He told my sister, in a voice designed for people to overhear, that he would be documenting this interference. My father did not rise as bait. He kept his eyes on the bored kind cop and said, politely, "We are here at the time written." The cop made a note like he was collecting raindrops. Court was Thursday. The hallway was a hive where everyone pretended to be bees. Our lawyer had a folder that clicked open like a small relief. When they called our case, I took my sister's bag because it gave my hands a job. The judge wore tired like a uniform. He looked at the paper, then at my sister, then at the lawyer, and then, briefly, at the man who used to be her husband. He asked basic questions in a voice that did not enjoy drama. He told both of them to speak to each other like the children were in the room, because as far as the court was concerned, they always were. The ex's lawyer tried estrangement like it was a card with a dragon on it. Our lawyer didn't swat, he placed. He gave the judge my father's letter and my letter and the photo of the bunk bed where the kids had wrestled the top sheet into a nest. He mentioned pickup times that had been met exactly and a kid's spelling list left on our kitchen table by accident. He said, support looks like this. The judge, who I'm convinced is a person that naps in his car at lunch with the seatbelt on, asked if anyone was preventing the children from sleeping, eating, or going to school. He asked if the father had missed or been denied any time since the last order. He asked the ex if he had any actual emergency besides dislike. Then he set the motion down the way you set down a plate that isn't yours. He didn't grant the modification. He told both of them to use an app for all communication because the app doesn't have flares, just timestamps. He ordered exchanges at the library on Maple because books calm people down, and I honestly liked him then. He told them to take the co-parenting class that meets in the basement of the municipal building with fluorescent lights that buzz like anxious bees. He told my father he wasn't a party to the case and then told him, anyway, that he appreciated the letter. My father nodded and then nodded again slower like he was learning the rhythm of thank yous. After court, my father bought kulfi from a cart that had probably been illegal at some point and handed me pistachio without asking because he remembered. He handed my mother mango like a soft apology and my sister malai like he was choosing it for the first time. He didn't get himself any until we were already sticky. He said, library is better than police, as if he had invented libraries and should get the credit now. On the sidewalk, my sister exhaled so big a leaf moved on a tree that had no right participating in our day. The first library exchange felt like a field trip. The kids sat on the carpet in the children's section looking like very serious executives about to negotiate with a puppet. My father stood 3 stacks away pretending to read about gardening while clearly trying to memorize the pattern on the carpet in case anyone ever asked him to draw it from memory. When the ex walked in, he did the tight mouth again. He asked, very loudly, if we planned to parade the children through the entire extended family. My father put the book back on the shelf in the wrong place, which he will regret for a week, and turned around. He didn't use the man's name. He said, we will follow the order. Then he asked my nephew, did you bring the book with the lion? And my nephew produced a book with a tiger and corrected everyone like he was paid to. The ex handed over a packet of papers one beat too dramatically like the star of a show no one was watching. It was the co-parenting class schedule. My sister said, thank you. My father said, thank you slower, because he has decided that gratitude is a lever that works in more machinery than people think. At home, my father started crossing off boxes on his list like he was winning a game only he knew the rules too. He oiled the hinges in my sister's apartment door and it stopped screaming. He shortened the curtain and then said it was still long and my mother said it was fine and then shortened it more anyway. He replaced a bulb with one that made the kitchen look like morning. He moved a toy shelf from one wall to the other, then back, then to a third place that was wrong but will be right in a week. He cannot leave the freezer alone now that he knows it hides money. He keeps shuffling peas like they are currency. Friday night, my girlfriend finally met everyone at my parents' place because she insisted you can't just date the person, you date the plate and the loudness too. She brought flowers wrapped in the kind of paper that makes noise and my mother melted in real time like wax near a flame. My father tried to act like he wasn't impressed by someone who ate with her hands like she had always done it, but he asked her if she wanted more rice twice, which is his test and his welcome mat. My sister watched the two of them talk about a TV show I haven't seen and relaxed in a way I haven't seen either. My niece tied a thread around my wrist and called it practice for a day that isn't here yet, and my father made a joke about buying stock in sweets because this house now apparently observes all festivals with full compliance. On Sunday, the ex texted my sister 2 minutes before pickup. He was downstairs early and would she hurry? She didn't rush. She told the kids to finish their water and put on shoes properly. He'll all the way in, not that stomp and go thing. We went down as a small armada. The man was leaning against his car with confidence you wear like a bad cologne. He saw my father and arranged his face into polite hostility. He told my sister he had a new schedule in mind. He had written it himself and would be sending it through the app as a courtesy and expected compliance. My father said, to nobody in particular and exactly everyone, we will read what the court writes. He put his hand on my nephew's head like he was measuring weather and told him to remember the library lion was actually a tiger. The push that wanted to happen didn't. It got bored and left. Late that night my father sent me another blurry picture from that odd number. The room again. The paper on the wall with the boxes had new smudges where fingers had touched it. Next to door, oil, he added door, quiet, and drew a check mark like a small bird. Under sweets, no, he had written sometimes, and then scratched it out and written sometimes again. He wrote, judge said books. Which book for the big one? And, after a minute, ice cream pistachio was correct. Then, as if he had been waiting to ask until we had all done our share, when is the class? I will sit outside.